So what's the Grape Explorer talking about today? So what I wanted to do with this episode is talk about what we call our Grand Cru series, where I identify a property that, of course, I have a past, a present, and a future with. And I wanted to really pinpoint a property today that I thought is very, very special, especially from an historical standpoint. It's called Chateau Pavie. And I wanted to zoom in a little bit on this wine because, this is from the Perse collection of wines. It's actually, Chateau Pavie is quite famous, but Gerard Perse has been trying to do, a lot of things to, to stir up a little bit of business for himself, which is great. And I think that, I admire what the Perse family has actually done. He and his wife Chantal are doing a great job running Chateau Pavie. But I wanted to dive in a little bit about the historical perspectives on this property. So you can actually see right here, this wine is in the Pied Cote. And what we wanted to talk about when we say the Pied, which means walk, walk to, you can actually walk from Ozon and you can actually walk from Pavie to downtown Saint-Emilion. That is considered to be the nirvana of all Saint-Emilion. Not to say that Cheval Blanc does not produce a great wine, and they're in the outskirts, they're near Pomerol. But they always said that the closer you are to the actual city of Saint-Emilion, you're producing great, great wines. And why? Well, because Saint-Emilion is perched on a limestone hill, and it's almost a gigantic limestone deposit. So all of the greatest wines that you would say that exist in Saint-Emilion, and of course we're going to put it on the map here, Saint-Emilion. You can see this big region right here is all Saint-Emilion. It's quite large as opposed to its neighbors, Pomerol, quite small, in proximity. But Saint-Emilion is quite large, and there's a lot of properties here that exist. But they do have a classification in Saint-Emilion, and every 10 years they change the classification. Some people have been dropping out of the classification because they either don't think it's to their benefit or they just are not really interested in it. So there is today, this system is called Grand Cru Class A. Pavie is what they call an A grouping, which means they are considered one of the top and the best. And, from historical perspective, I'm going to explain a little bit about that. But what I wanted to share with you was a wine today that I secured here. This is called Esprit de Pavie, and basically it's not their second wine, so that's why it's always, you have to be careful with when you look at the label. You might think that this is the second wine of Pavie. It is not the second wine. They have another wine called Arôme de Pavie. So you have Chateau Pavie, you have Arôme de Pavie, and you have what's called Esprit. And I would say that this is a third wine, but I'm going to explain a little bit about what Chateau Pavie is all about. So, back in the day, and if you look right here, you can see Chateau Pavie, and I have my Foray book I broke out, and you can see the owners were the Valette family. I actually had some great conversations with Patrick Valette. I remember his dad. They were from Chile, and they actually, all the children were born in Chile, but they actually owned Chateau Pavie, very, very historic property. You're talking, there was two properties that we say, from a historical perspective. Chateau Ozon was from the Roman poet Ausonius. That's the reason why it was called Ozon. And Chateau Pavie goes back to Roman times as well. So we're talking 2,000 years of history. It's been owned by many, many people. The Valette family, they were always trying to keep up with the Joneses in Saint-Emilion. I love Saint-Emilion. It's one of my favorite areas in all the world, as well as in Bordeaux. But it's time for a lot of these families to sell, their properties because they just cannot keep up with the banks and, the money that's coming in here. Especially like Cheval Blanc is owned by one of the richest guys in the world. We all know, the money that flows through all these properties. So what happened was the Valette family had to sell to the Perse family. So Gerard Perse, who I'm very, very familiar with, owned a property called Chateau Montbosquet in Saint-Emilion. Good property. It was Grand Cru at the time. not Grand Cru Class A, you know, and when he had the opportunity to buy Chateau Pavie, he was like, you know, all over it. So he bought that property. And I remember even in 1998, Chateau Pavie, you know, producing a really great wine. And then when 2000 vintage rolled along, he raised his prices almost like 50%. And everybody was shocked. It was shock and awe. It's like, how can this guy raise his prices 50%? Well, guess what? Robert Parker gave him 98 to 100 points on his wine. And then it just soared from there. And Michel Rolland had a lot of hand in that too, because he was involved at Chateau Pavie, and you know, they were making great wines, but Robert Parker, it was really a darling of Robert Parker, because he just said that the wines were like, you know, one of the greatest vintages of Saint-Emilion that he'd ever tasted in his life. And of course, you know, we're talking later on. But now I want to bring you up the future of this property, because I think it's interesting, because Chateau Pavie also owned Pavie de Cesse, and they also owned a vineyard called La Clousière. And what he decided to do, which I'm really sad about, because I love Pavie de Cesse and I love Clousière. I thought that those were two really great wines, but he encompassed everything now into Chateau Pavie. But guess what? He is making rock star wines. And I wanted to highlight my notes in 2022, and I wanted to read these notes to you, because, you know, the Arôme, which is the second wine, I gave that 93, 94 plus points. That's for a second wine. And I thought it's expressive, nice pinpoint tannin, acidity back, chewy, dense finish, powerful, sustained, great potential here. 93, 94 plus points for a second wine, for the Arôme. And then when I got to the Grand Cru Class A, thick, black color, stained in the glass, deep to its core, expressive notes, violets, faded roses, kirsch, spice box, tea, liquid minerals, all in the palate. The flavors are explosive in texture, pinpoint acidity, a great Pavie in the making. Could be a perfect wine. I rated it 98 to 100 points. And I thought it was probably the most perfect Pavie that I ever tasted. And I can't say that I was always a big fan of Pavie back in the day, because I always thought the wines were a little higher in alcohol, didn't really show well to me, didn't have the vineyard expression of the terroir of Pavie, that beautiful texture. But, you know, now I understand. If he's going to put Pavie de Cesse, and if he's going to put La Clousière, which is like a little parcel, very small little place on the top of the hill, incredible limestone, mineral tone, you know, wines to those wines. Now I can see why, because he wants to be, you know, the top wine in Saint-Emilion. I think he's achieving those levels. I think Gerard Perse, hats off to you, buddy, because the 2022 was one of the greatest Pavies I think I've ever had in my life. And I've had Pavies going back 30, 20 years, but I think you're onto something. I think the wines are really, really great. I wanted to bring this wine to the table because this is affordable wine. This is $30 a bottle. I think if you're out there and, you know, Pavie, right now the prices are jumping and they're leaping because of what he's doing. Check out the Arôme though. Check out the second wine of Pavie. Nobody pays attention to this wine. I think it's rivaling a lot of just everybody else's first wines, which I know that sounds crazy, but you know, when you make a second wine, that can actually rival some of the guys in the first level, you know, and even better. I tasted a bunch of Saint-Emilion Grand Cru Class A, and I thought the second wine was better than, I would say, 50, 60% of the other Grand Cru Class A's. Shh, don't say anybody, because I might get in trouble by saying that. But check out the second wine of Pavie, and then if you're really interested in the first wine that's going to rival anything in Saint-Emilion, check out Chateau Pavie 2022. Again, this is David Kohl, the Grape Explorer, always bringing really great wines to the plate. Cheers.